420.
That's right, 420, and we have to start from as to suffering. And the chapter is undivine and divine, divine and undivine. So we have already discussed this many times. There is nothing undivine. There is only less divine and more divine. That's all. Okay. So this idea, because we are in the dualities, and when we are in the duality, you see extremities. So that's a problem. So shall we read the para, and then we'll come back.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm reading.
Yes, please.
As to the suffering, which is so great a stumbling block to our understanding of the universe, it is evidently a consequence of the limitation of consciousness, the restriction of force which prevents us from mastering or assimilating the touch of what is to us other force. The result of this incapacity and disharmony is that the delight of the touch cannot be seized, and it affects our sense with a reaction of discomfort or pain, a defect or excess, a discord resultant in inner or outer injury, born of division between our power of being and the power of being that meets us. Behind in our self and spirit is the all delight of the universal being, which takes its account of the contact, a delight first in the enduring, and then in the conquest of the suffering, and finally in its transmutation that shall come hereafter. For pain and suffering are a perverse and contrary term of the delight of existence, and they can turn into their opposite, even into the original all delight anand. This all delight is not present in the universal alone, but it is here secret in ourselves, as we discover when we go back from our outward consciousness into the self within us. The psychic being in us takes its account even of its most perverse or contrary, as well as its more benign experiences, and grows by the rejection of them or acceptance. It extracts the divine meaning and use from our most poignant sufferings, difficulties, misfortunes. Nothing but this all delight could dare or bear to impose such experiences on itself or on us. Nothing else could turn them thus to its own utility and our spiritual profit. So too, nothing but an inalienable harmony of being inherent in an inalienable unity of being would throw out so many harshest apparent discords and yet force them to its purpose so that in the end they are unable to do anything else but to serve and secure, and even themselves change into elements that constitute a flowing universal rhythm and ultimate harmony. At every turn, it is the divine reality which we can discover behind that which we are yet compelled by the nature of the superficial consciousness in which we dwell to call undivine, and in a sense are right in using that appellation, for these appearances are a veil over the divine perfection, a veil necessary for the present, but not at all the true and complete figure.
Very interesting para. He explains so beautifully. So we will give examples to ourselves and understand what he's saying. So I will first summarize it for you, and then we'll go into detail. So the details are very important, and because then there is logic and there is examples, so we'll understand what he's saying. So let us see what he's saying here. Okay, so just 1 second. Yeah, here we are. So we have dealt with ignorance. Now we turn to our attention to pain and suffering. Chandra is taking up all those things which seem to be undivine. So in the previous para, he has taken already the ignorance. Okay. Ignorance also is he has told you that ignorance is the power of the knowledge to limit itself. And why should it limit itself? That also we have seen, that it has to temper itself and make itself proportionate to conditions in the physical world which are very limited. So you can't have huge amount of knowledge in a place where there is darkness. So you need to tone down your own knowledge so that it becomes effective. If you use a knowledge, if someone with a rocket science explains to me, I'll understand nothing at all. So, rocket science is very high knowledge, and I will understand nothing at all if he talks to me. So, he has to tone down his high knowledge to my level. Exactly that same thing what Sridhar is saying here. It's very easy to understand. So now he is saying we have explained how ignorance is also not undivine. Now we come to suffering. We have dealt with ignorance. Now we turn our attention to pain and suffering, which are so difficult to understand and accept. Okay, that's one of the main things against the divine argument is the world is full of suffering. How to justify that? So, which is so difficult to understand and accept. Yet, it is exactly the same argument as for the ignorance. The limitation of consciousness causes a division in the oneness of things, and we see self and not self. We see dualities. This limitation of consciousness causes pain when the external impact is greater than our power of being to absorb the shock. So it's very simple. Again, we can give the very, very useful example of the gentle wind, which we accept very happily and we are happy. But when the storm comes and hits us, we are very unhappy because we can't absorb it. Okay, that's exactly the same thing. So when an impact comes from outside, okay, someone strokes your back or your face, you find it pleasant. But that stroking also can become a blow. The force has not changed, only the intensity has changed. And when the intensity changes, it becomes unbearable for you, you suffer. So that's the explanation he's giving. Limitation of consciousness is causing the pain and suffering. There's another way of looking at it also. If you can't do a thing, okay, suppose you do a thing very easily, you get joy. I've been able to, my pole vault limit was, my 100 meters run limit was 12 seconds. Now I can do it in 11.8. I'll be very happy. But if I can't do it and goes beyond 12, I'll be very unhappy because I have not succeeded. So that also is one aspect of pain and suffering. And someone can be very unhappy or someone can suffer badly. When they lose, you'll see athletes sometimes crying. Okay. So, so this is the what Shendra is explaining. Limitation of consciousness, limitation of capacity is one that causes pain and suffering. Okay. This limitation of consciousness causes pain when the external impact is greater than our power of being to absorb the shock. The same shock becomes pleasant when our power increases to meet it happily and assimilates it easily. All movements and forces in the universe are founded in Ananda alone. Ananda is there. Our incapacity to absorb the not self external impact causes pain and suffering. But when we go beyond our outer nature, into ourselves or above ourselves, both, into ourselves is psychic and above ourselves is the self. We see the all delight that pervades the universe. Then you see that everything is really Ananda, but when it comes down into the lower, it becomes distorted. Okay. Another image also you can give to yourself to explain this, to understand this. If a stick is from air to water, because the air is one medium and water is another medium. If you put a stick there, it appears to be bent, but it only appears to be bent. It is not really bent. So when the Ananda or knowledge or power comes down in the gradation of substance, from one substance to denser substance, it appears to be perverse. It appears to be bent. So that is exactly, actually it is not. So when we change our way of looking at things, we see that Ananda is there everywhere. Then he is talking about the psychic being. The psychic being in us meets all external touches, Bahya Sparsha, with, there are many gradations, how the psychic being meets the Bahya Sparsha, the external impacts. First, with equanimity, endurance, and titiksha. You learn to bear the shocks. Okay? Example, Srimdo, to teach himself how to bear the shocks, started walking on the hot terrace, summer terrace with bare feet. Okay. Others were teaching themselves in many other ways, but Srimdo was he found this method. Actually, He was walking on that hot, and I can tell you because I have a terrace in summer, and when you walk on it, my God, it's really hot. It burns your legs. If you have a terrace, you can try that and see. So he was teaching himself that. So this is the first. First, in equanimity, endurance. You teach yourself. That's the first stage of samatha. Titiksha. You teach yourself. Then second stage, then later with high-seated indifference and self. When you go to the self, it is high-seated indifference. It makes no difference to you at all because the world seems to be unreal. And lastly, you will take delight in all these touches. Example again, those experience in jail, huge black ants are coming and biting him, and instead of getting pain, he is getting ananda. So this is the last stage. Everything becomes ananda because the distortions have disappeared, and you are in the your consciousness has increased so much that all external impacts become very pleasant because you can absorb them very easily. Hear what is the psychic being takes delight even in the battle and struggle and grows towards divinity with these experiences. The psychic extracts the essence, rejects the superficial externalities, and utilizes all experiences. The all delight is there in the universe behind all phenomena. So we have to actually, he has dealt with this problem in the Life Divine much earlier, if you remember. The delight of existence, the problem, and delight of existence, the solution. There he has given, but here he is summarizing in very, very short way. It's a surface phenomena. If you go deep into yourself, you will see that everything is Ananda. Okay? It's only a surface distortion. So this is what he has said here. So we'll now go to each sentence, see, because there also is very interesting. We have to understand how he's sometimes saying some quite uh, interesting things. I'll give you examples of what he's saying. Okay, so we start looking at this. So, as to suffering, okay, I'm beginning the sentence with the para. As to suffering, which is so great a stumbling block to our understanding of the universe, it is evidently a consequence of the limitation of consciousness, the restriction of force, which prevents us from mastering or assimilating the touch of what is to us other force. Here also you will note his prose. He says there are two things. One is mastering, and the other is not mastering, but being able to bear, assimilating the touch. So always his prose is such that he includes many, many possibilities. He doesn't leave out any possibility. Here he's talking of total mastery or not mastery perhaps, but not being affected adversely by assimilating the touch of what is to us other force. Shyamno often uses the word assimilating. Okay, to assimilate, we know when you are eating the the food that is there, sometimes it gets rejected. Okay, but mostly it gets assimilated. Slowly it is absorbed into the system. Exactly the same way, just as you absorb food, your consciousness also absorbs the right vibrations and you assimilate them and you grow as a consequence. Assimilating the touch of what is to us other force. Now note that the other force is something coming from outside. Okay, it is not your own force. You have your own force, but there is another other force. Example, the wind. Okay, that's a very good example because one can understand easily what he's saying. But it need not be only the wind. It can be someone's speech. It can be an animal attacking you. It can be a human being attacking you. It can be so many. It can be physical. It can be a vital or even a mental. Someone insults you. That also is an bahya sparsha. So all these things you learn to bear them first with absolutely calm of what is to us. The result of this incapacity and disharmony is that the delight of the touch cannot be seized and it affects our sense with a reaction of discomfort or pain, a defect or excess, a discord resulting in inner and or outer injury, born of division between our power of being and the power of being that meets us. So, very interesting. Again, he is giving so many different categories. That's the interesting part. Instead of those, not only the philosophy but also the way of expressing what he's saying. So, I'm going back to the phrase. Okay, so it is evidently a consequence of the limitation of consciousness. This we have understood. Okay, when your consciousness is less than that which is coming from outside, you suffer. Okay, the restriction of force which prevents us from mastering or assimilating the touch of what is to us other force. He has put a colon, and he is going to explain the result of this incapacity and disharmony. When there is incapacity, there is a disharmony. Disharmony between what and what? Between your own capacity and the bahya sparsha, the one that is coming from outside. There is a disharmony. Is that the delight of the touch cannot be seized, and it affects our sense with a reaction of discomfort or pain. This happens when the bahya sparsha is greater than your capacity to absorb it. If your capacity to absorb it is there, it's very pleasant. Okay. Just now again another image has come into my mind and I am sharing it with you. Okay. If your teeth are all fine and you eat cold ice cream, you get delight. But suppose the enamel on your teeth has gone away, okay, it will cause you pain. So the same ice cream is going to cause you either delight or pain, depending on your condition. It's so interesting. I was reading this idea came into my head. It's interesting, no? The ice cream that you are eating can cause you great ananda, but it can also cause you pain. Okay, so from mastering and assimilating the touch of what is to us, the result of this incapacity and disharmony is that the delight of the touch cannot be seized, and it affects our sense with a reaction of discomfort or pain, a defect or excess. Now there you are again, see, it can be discomfort which is less of a pain, or pain. He is giving you gradations again, or it can be a defect or an excess. Okay, there could be a defect in you which is giving you discomfort, but if it's an excess, then it is pain. Okay, excess of what? The force coming from outside. A discord resulting as a resultant in inner and outer injury. There you are, very interesting. So inner injury, when you are insulted, for instance, okay, or you are given an idea which you don't like, or someone criticizes you, it's an inner injury. But an outer injury, if someone attacks you physically, it's an outer injury. That also can be very unpleasant. So he is including all these. We have to see each way how he is describing. He is covering the entire field, leaving out nothing. Born of division between our power of being and the power of being that meets us. So our power of being, we have a certain capacity, but the capacity of the outward touch can be more or less. That's what he's saying. So it meets us. We have discussed this also, that we have we are constantly interacting with the universe. No? So when you are interacting with the universe is giving its touches to you, physical, vital and mental. Okay, even spiritual, but normally we are not conscious of the spiritual. But divine guidance is always there, so that also is there. But you have your own capacity is there, and it is a combination of the two. This is what we say. So if the power in your power is more than the one coming, you enjoy it. If it is less, then there is pain. So that meets us, the power of being that meets us from outside. Behind, in our self and spirit, is the all delight of the universal. Now, same way using the word behind. That means horizontal, not above, but inside. That means he is referring to the psychic. Okay? Behind in our self and spirit is the all delight. when the psyche comes forward, it is absolutely true that everything becomes beautiful, joyful, and you see beauty everywhere. Beauty, joy, and delight. Beauty, joy, and love. Love also comes in. Okay? So, all delight of the universal being, which takes its account of the contact, a delight first in the enduring, and then in the conquest of the suffering, and finally in its transmutation. This he has told you in one line, but in synthesis, he describes in 2 or 3 paragraphs. First, you teach yourself to bear the shocks of life. Okay? Which is too much, you start bearing, and you can increase your capacity. Okay? That is what training in the physical world is all about. When you train yourself, you are actually teaching yourself skills which you did not have before. So that's exactly what you're doing here also. So behind in our self and spirit is the all delight of the universal being, which takes its account of the contact. A delight first in the enduring, and then in the conquest of the suffering, and finally its transmutation. So 3 stages. First, you learn to bear the shock. Secondly, you have conquered and you're not suffering anymore. At the beginning you are suffering, but later on you don't suffer, but it is neutral. You have neutralized the pain. And the third stage, not neutralizing, but turning it into ananda. Okay. So 3 stages he is talking about. In synthesis, he gives all the 3, each one para. Here he has taken only one line. Okay. So a delight first in the enduring and then in the conquest of the suffering. Stage 2, finally its transmutation, that shall come hereafter. Okay, that shall come hereafter, not immediately. It comes in future. So that's the third level. For pain and suffering are a perverse and contrary term of the delight of existence, and they can turn into their opposite, even to the original all delight, ananda. So he is using the word perverse and contrary term. So again, we can give the example of the stick in the water. From one medium when it comes down, we are in the water. The other thing, the ananda is in the air. Okay, and when it is coming down and entering our level, it seems to be defective. It becomes pain. So in the same way, you can also explain yourself to that. This all delight means it is there everywhere. Okay, is not present in the universal alone, but it is here secret in ourselves, as we discover when we go back from our outward consciousness into the self within us. Now, he is using a very interesting language here. He is saying into the self within us. But he is using the word within here in a very large sense, because the self is actually above us, but here within us means deeper within ourselves. The psychic being in us takes its account even of its most perverse or contrary, as well as its most benign experiences, and grows by the rejection of them or acceptance. Now look at that. So when the pain comes, you reject them, and then you can grow. Slowly, slowly you learn to reject them. But there is also another way of accepting. Okay. In other words, what does that mean? One, you reject violently, and you benefit. Okay. You learn how to not to be affected by it. But acceptance, how do you explain acceptance? That is, you are learning samatha. Okay. You are letting it come into you, and you are enduring it, and you are finally being able to bear it. So that is acceptance. So there can be 2 ways of doing it. Okay. There is no one way in yoga. There are so many different ways of yoga. In fact, Sri Aurobindo says that very clearly. Even when you want to make your mind silent, he says either you throw out the thoughts. That's the rejection. Okay, you throw out the thoughts. But there's another way. You let the thoughts come in, but start watching them passively. And when you start watching them passively, there's a distance grows between the watcher and the watched. Okay, so then there's a separation, and then you go into the self. So always there are 2 ways of doing things, never only one. Now it extracts a divine. What is it? The psychic being. It extracts a divine meaning and use from our most poignant sufferings, difficulties, misfortunes. When you are in the psychic being, you realize why that pain is coming. You realize that it's your own limitation that is causing it, and that the pain is actually a means of training you. Okay? It's something positive, it's not something negative at all. Okay? That is what he said, is saying. And he is using three words: sufferings, difficulties, and misfortunes. So sufferings can be individual, okay, your own suffering. Difficulties can be coming from outside also, or it can be something, a misfortune is a great difficulty. So a misfortune, for instance, a tsunami comes in, it's your whole family. It's a misfortune. Difficulties are little milder, okay. So he is giving you again three words, and he is giving you the gradations of all these the experiences which you can cause pain. Nothing but this all delight could dare or bear to impose such experiences on itself or on us. Now, here also we have to understand what is this on itself. When you realize that the human being is nothing but the divine, essentially, he is imposing the suffering on himself. Or if you want to see a human being, it's on us. Actually, it's the same thing, but depends on how we are looking at it. Okay. I don't see myself as divine, so I feel that the misfortune is being imposed on me. But if you are in a spiritual condition, you see that it is the divine imposing the misfortune on himself. So, just like the other one, rejection and acceptance, here also there are two ways of looking at it: on itself or on us. Nothing else could turn them thus to its own utility and spiritual profit. So all sufferings, difficulties, misfortunes can be used very, very usefully to profit from it. Okay. So usually to the children, I give another example of how difficulties can be used as profit. Okay, you can actually take help of it. So you may find it a little funny, but it is useful. Suppose you are sitting in an aeroplane and the aeroplane has to take off. If there is a wind from the back, it will help you. Okay, it will help the plane to rise fast, and it will not be an impediment at all. But suppose there is a headwind, okay, wind coming into the wind coming into you, then your speed is less and you have to increase your speed. But also there is another way of doing it. You place I'm showing it on the image, okay. Instead of going like this, you go like this. Then what happens? The wind that is coming here will actually make you rise up. So you can use a headwind, which is a difficulty, okay, you can make it something advantageous to yourself. So that's exactly what Sylvia is saying. Could turn it to its own utility and spiritual profit. Less physical images, it's very easy. When a very strong person gets a difficulty, he is not easily going to bend. He is going to conquer it. So it is encouraging you to go beyond your own level of capacity. That's what Sylvia is saying. You can make it a spiritual profit. So too, nothing but an inalienable harmony of being, inherent in its inalienable unity of being, would throw out so many harshest apparent discords and yet force them to its purpose, so that in the end they are unable to do anything else but to serve and secure, and even themselves change into elements that constitute a growing universal rhythm and ultimate harmony. There are so many ways of looking at it. All difficulties are a challenge to you to grow beyond yourself. So you can use it in that way, you are going to profit. Okay? So it depends on your attitude. And that attitude will come in time. In the beginning, you may feel depressed, but over many lives, your capacity to withstand that challenge grows. Okay? So that's what he's saying. So many harshest apparent discords, and yet force them to purpose, so that in the end they are unable to do anything else but to serve and secure, and even themselves change into elements that constitute what? A growing universal rhythm and ultimate harmony. At every turn, it's a divine reality which we can discover behind. So that means not on the surface but behind that which we are, yet compelled by the nature of the superficial consciousness in which we dwell to call undivine, and in a sense are right in using that appellation. Now here another statement which can puzzle you. So when you see the undivine, there is a way of saying that yes, you are seeing the correct, because it depends at which level you are. So if you are, there is an undivine. We must not be superficially optimistic. We must realize that yes, there is a condition where there is a undivine condition. Okay, it's another way of looking at the same thing. On the one hand, he's telling you that there is nothing undivine, and yet on the other hand, he's telling you that there is an undivine. Okay, so it's the question of how you look at it. All these spiritual truths are beyond the mind and beyond the logic. That's why it's difficult to understand. But it depends on how you are looking at it, and both have got validity. That's the whole point. Okay. So at every turn, it is the divine reality which we can discover behind that which we are yet compelled by the nature of the superficial consciousness in which we dwell to call undivine, and in a sense are right in using their appellation. At our level, a murder is definitely wrong, stealing is wrong. Okay, so you are right absolutely saying these are undivine things. But you rise in consciousness, that which appeared to be wrong is not so wrong as you thought it was. Okay, it changes. So for these appearances are a veil over the divine perfection, a veil necessary for the present, but not at all true and complete figure. See, why is it necessary for the present? Because that's the one that goads you to go beyond yourself. When you get suffering, naturally you don't want suffering. You start seeking for a way out of suffering. And that is the soul. It is telling you not to keep lying, but to get up and start conquering your difficulties. That's what he said. So, very nice, interesting para where he explained. First, he explained ignorance, undivine, then now he is explaining the suffering. Now we have got enough time. We got 10 minutes and we can read the next one. But even when we thus regard the universe. So who will read next? Archana Di read. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes,
Okay, go ahead.
but even uh, yes, but even when we thus regard the universe, we cannot and ought not to dismiss as entirely and radically false and unreal the values that are given to it by our own limited human consciousness. For grief, pain, suffering, error, falsehood, ignorance, weakness, wickedness, incapacity, non-doing of what should be done, and wrongdoing, deviation of will, and denial of will, egoism, limitation, division from other beings with whom we should be one, all that makes up the effective figure of what we call evil are facts of the world consciousness, not fictions and unrealities, although they are facts whose complete sense or true value is not that which we assign to them in our ignorance. Still, our sense of them is part of a true sense. Our values of them are necessary to their complete values. One side of the truth of these things we discover when we get into a deeper and larger consciousness, for we find then that there is a cosmic and individual utility in what presents itself to us as adverse and evil. For without experience of pain, we would not get all the infinite value of the divine delight of which pain is in travail. All ignorance is a penumbra which environs an orb of knowledge. Every error is significant of the possibility and the effort of a discovery of the truth. Every weakness and failure is a first sounding of gulfs of power of potentiality. All division is intended to enrich by an experience of various sweetness, of unification, the joy of realized unity. All this imperfection is to us evil, but all evil is in travail of the eternal good, for all is an imperfection, which is the first condition in the law of life evolving out of unconsciousness of a greater perfection in the manifesting of the hidden divinity. But at the same time, our present feeling of this evil and imperfection, the revolt of our consciousness against them, is also a necessary valuation. For if we have first to face and endure them, the ultimate command on us is to reject, to overcome, to transform the life and the nature. It is for that end that their insistence is not allowed to slacken. The soul must learn the result of the ignorance, must begin to feel the reaction as a spur to its endeavor to mastery and conquest, and finally to a greater endeavor of transformation and transcendence. It is possible when we live inwardly in the depth to arrive at a state of vast inner equality and peace, which is untouched by the reaction of the outer nature, and that is a great but incomplete liberation. For the outer nature too has a right to deliverance. But even if our personal deliverance is complete, still there is suffering of others, the world travail, which the great of soul cannot regard with indifference. There is a unity with all being, with something within us feels, and the deliverance of other must be felt as intimate to its own deliverance.
Yeah. Okay. So about a page, and we'll do one thing. We have about 6 minutes. So I'll do one thing. We may not be able to finish it, so I'll just give you the summary of what he's saying. It can help. Okay, so this is the what he's saying here. Although it is Ananda that is at the base of all creation, we must recognize also that what we call evil is real and true and not false. In other words, Swami is not escaping like the Buddhist and the Mayavadin saying, oh, the physical world, all this is unreal. Okay? So, because they are not concerned with the lower, they are interested only in the higher. And so far as they are concerned, they are right. Because if you don't want suffering, go there. But then we come back to the famous example of the operation successful, patient dead. Okay, because who is suffering? There's nobody now suffering. Okay, whereas Swami says no, the patient also must be made to feel the operation has to be successful. You have to get rid of the suffering, but you must also not kill the patient. In other words, the world also must be able to get the Ananda. It's not enough to eliminate it, that you have to also cure it. That's what he's saying. We must recognize also that what we call evil is real and true and not false. It depends on where you're looking. Okay? Grief, pain, suffering, error, falsehood, ignorance, weakness, wickedness, incapacity, non-doing of what should be done, wrongdoing. Okay, there are two things. One is non-doing of what should be done, and there is also a wrongdoing. Okay, a deviation of will and denial of ego, of will, egoism, limitation, and division from others with whom we should be one. Okay, I have quoted actually from Sri Aurobindo, are together what we call evil. So he is defining evil. Okay? That which should do, we are not doing. That which is wrongdoing is also evil. They are not to be dismissed as false and untrue. Because if you are at the physical level, you have to solve the problem, not escape from it. The others are escaping from the problem, saying it doesn't exist. That is true in a certain sense, but not true from the ultimate sense. These defects are not only real, but have also their purpose and function. Their true significance, though not what we give to them in our ignorance, is revealed and understood by us when we go into the divine consciousness. So, When we are in the physical world, it's absolutely real to us. When we go into the spiritual level of consciousness, they seem to be absolutely unreal, but that's only half true. Because you have escaped the problem, but you have not solved the problem of the physical world. Individually, you have solved your problem. When you go to the higher level of consciousness, then you understand that yes, even the physical world must be given its due. It is the body has got the right to have good health. The vital has got the right to good enjoyment. And the mind has got the right for true knowledge. So you have to give that and not escape. Pain and suffering are the deformation of bliss and are a first step towards the ananda. Ignorance is the deformation of knowledge but is a preliminary step towards it. Now, he is giving an example which makes it very, very clear. Error leads to truth. Weakness goads us towards true power. Now, if error you don't make a mistake, you will never know what the truth is. If you only make a mistake and you analyze the mistake like we do when we are going into space, okay, there's a failure of the rocket, then they start analyzing what happened. Okay, nowadays you have in all international flights, by international even national flights, you have what is called a black box, and that black box records everything that's happening to the plane. Then you analyze and find out what went wrong with the why the accident occurred. So then you know. So you make a mistake and you analyze the mistake and you grow. So error is always a principle that leads you to truth. That's what he's saying. Exactly in the same way, suffering is a process by which you go to the ananda. Weakness goads us towards true power. Thus, what we regard as evil is precisely that which impels us towards the good. All limitation is striving towards completeness. It is because evil exists that the soul of man does not relax or slacken its effort towards God. Okay. But you can say, oh, so many people do. But then they are at a level where that happens. But a time comes when your level will be such that you won't accept the evil. You want to get above it. But we must note that personal deliverance is not sufficient. The Mayavadin and the Buddhists are solving the problem of pain and suffering individually, but not universally. The great souls are who? Okay. Vivekananda, Sri Aurobindo, Mother, they are the great of soul. Always strive for the liberation of entire mankind. In the synthesis, Sri gives an example also of Vivekananda. He actually quotes Vivekananda's letter to a Western disciple. He says, Vivekananda says, in a very striking passage, so striking that Sri Aurobindo quotes it fully, the letter. Vivekananda is telling his disciple, I am not interested in liberation. I am not interested in divine the perfection. I am interested in the God the miserable, God the suffering, God the fallen. So, what does it mean? It means that you have to solve the problem at the physical level. Okay? So, the great of soul always strive for the liberation of entire mankind. That's what Sridhar is saying. It is, we have to solve the problem absolutely at the rock bottom of matter and not simply escape from it. That's what he's saying. Okay? So we have crossed our limit, but we read the summary. Next time we can redo if you feel the need, we can redo. Because again, as usual, every word that he uses gives us a glimpse of how he looks at the world. But even when we thus regard the, let's note it down. I don't know the page, but even when we thus regard. Okay. Okay. Au revoir, all of you. Au revoir, and have a nice day.
Merci beaucoup.